Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento. And you know what? For once, I might not be the one bringing all the energy or most of the energy to today's episode because today's guest already put a smile on my face. He is unbelievable at what he does. And in today's episode, you're not going to be learning about today's guest. You're not going to be learning about me. Most importantly, you're going to be learning about you because this guest's work really puts so much of life and leadership and relationships through a lens that's going to help us get a deeper understanding of ourselves so that we can live better, lead better, connect better, all of that good stuff. So I've built it up. Let me tell you about today's guest. I'm so excited to have him on. His name is Dr. Taylor Hartman. He is the psychologist who introduced motive to psychology. The Hartman Personality Profile is the only motive-based personality profile. All others are behavior-based. This body of work provides an honest foundation for mental health with exactness similar to math, where 2 + 2 almost or always equals 4. It is like a North Star that helps people make sense of themselves, their relationships, and their lives. Before I go into today's episode, I just want to share a little bit about what I found in my own research ahead of today's session because I love the way that Dr. Taylor's company and everyone, leaders all over the world, are using this to perform better in life and in business. And I just want to give you this simple explanation of it. The people code, you'll hear us use it interchangeably. The people code, the color code profile, the Hartman personality test, so much of this. The people code explains the why behind the what by identifying 4 basic personality types and showing you how to use color profiles to cultivate rich and balanced character in relationships. So whether you're motivated by power, intimacy, peace, fun, you're going to start viewing your life and yourself through a different lens today. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Dr. Taylor Hartman. All right, Dr. Taylor, I can't tell you how excited I am to have you here for today's episode. Welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Brian. Really good.
Thank you. So what I didn't say at the top of this episode is that not only are you a fellow author, not only are you a fellow podcaster, but you do so much to spread all of this stuff that you've learned and developed and studied and researched all along the years. I want listeners to hear it from you. What's your short story of how you ended up doing this incredible and profound work?
You know, now that I'm 74, I can't almost believe it. I back when I was like young, I realized that I really wanted to help people get better in my field of mental health, and nothing was there that was solid, always true. So I really did like a second PhD studying what motivates people. And at the end of the day, I had some inspiration, and the inspiration was motive is power, either power, intimacy, peace, or fun. And so that tied all my research together, and I finally understood why behind the what. Like, okay, so why do red personalities like to take charge and why are they demanding? I understood more. They just want to get from A to B. That's what makes them tick. And I didn't understand that before. Even though my mother is so red, she's like a Nazi. She ran the show, did things the way she wanted to do them, and we all stood in line and did what she wanted us to do. Blues are totally different. I married a blue. She's very intimacy based. They crave connection. That's what blues are all about. Even blue salespeople use relationships to build relationships. And then you have the whites. The whites are the one, there's always room for them at the table. They are the kindest people on the planet. They're driven by peace and they hate conflict. They'll do anything to avoid conflict. And then you have yellows, and they are the fun ones. They live in the present. In fact, there was a book written, Don't Get Over the Small Stuff. And I'm like, who doesn't get over the small stuff? Because I'm yellow, and I think that way. So yellows are very fun-based. They live in the moment, and they love living for good times, happiness, and positivity. So that's the 4 core options you have. And when I realized that dynamic, I put it to a book. And the book was to help people understand there's a way to understand who you are and to forgive others who are different.
Yeah, I love that overview, and it makes sense why your energy struck me so quickly when you and I got on, even before we hit record today, because you are fun. You do have that fun energy. You have a smile on your face that you bring to the table, and it's something that's so easy for me as a host to really feed off of. So I so appreciate that about you. Part of me looks at this list, and I can definitely see where I fit in, for sure. I'm a blue, for sure,
Great.
guilty. Yeah, and so with that in mind, I can think about all the different times in life and all the different hats that we wear. For example, for me, a big part of me growing up was I'm a middle child. I was always captain of my soccer teams. I was always a high achiever in the classroom. So many different aspects and roles that I play in life. Now I'm an uncle. There's so many different aspects. But Dr. Taylor, talk to us about how these things follow us through those different facets of life. Because it might be easy for someone to say, well, I'm in this setting, I'm motivated by results. When I'm in this setting, I'm motivated by this. Talk to us about that.
It's such a great question. I get that all the time. People are like, well, that's not how I am at work. And I will tell you, congruence is the key. You want to be congruent and then add the gifts of the other colors you need to be effective. So you as a blue, obviously can be sensitive and caring and very nurturing, which would make you a great captain, but you also want leadership, which you probably added some red traits. And you also probably had some yellow traits of cheerleading, engaging, helping your other players on the team do well. So I don't ever want people to think they should change their personality. I think they should add the character gifts of other colors to enhance their personality. You don't ever give away your core. You just simply blend it with other gifts other colors have. For example, I was never assertive, traveling the world. I'd show up at places and not get a hotel. And finally, my red friend says, no, here's how you get the hotel. And it changed my life, like dramatically. So I'm still yellow, but I developed the ability to be assertive in my life.
Yeah, I love that perspective. It's something that, gosh, it feels silly saying this to you here on the air, but it's something I joke around with my friends about. A lot of my friends will say, Brian, we don't necessarily see you get angry ever. And the joke that I always tell them is I'm like, I just don't keep anger in my wallet. Like, it's not an emotion that I even get to call on because it's not there for me. And yeah, thank you. And so I love the fact that you talk about being able to call on, because to me, what I'm picturing as a visual person and kind of a cheesy person is that what do we keep in our wallets? What are those things that we can call on? And just because you're a blue doesn't mean you can't call on red. You're right. For me, business-wise, red is something that for sure serves us. So talk to us more about that, because understanding motivation is one thing. Putting it to practice and being able to call on and use these other traits is the important thing. I want to hear how you take us through that.
So first of all, you have to be humble enough to accept what are my strengths and what are my limitations. And the profile gives you such great clarity on that. It says, I can't tell you how helpful it is to take that and go, oh my gosh, that makes sense. And then once you see that, then you look at the colors and you go, what is it they have that I need? What would make my life more effective? For example, I worked on being thoughtful. You'll love this as a blue. So I worked on being thoughtful for a whole 6 months. And my wife goes, being thoughtful is such an easy one to do. Why is that even hard for you? And I said, okay, so you wake up happy every day. I want you happy every day. And she's like, oh, I realize it's harder for me to do that than it is for you. And so I want everybody that's listening to think about which colors gifts do they lack the most? Is it red, blue, white, or yellow? And what gifts specifically would you need to make your life more abundant? So for me, I didn't need to be happier. I didn't need to be more in the moment. I needed to be more thoughtful of other people. And so I actually added a blue trait to do that.
Yeah, that makes me really think about the way that you frame that question. I also know how intentional you are about all the words that you choose. And you really said, what traits do we need to make our life more abundant? And right. What I hear when you say those words is I'm just like, yes, we have abundant lives. Naturally, whatever color you are, that's going to bring some level of abundance. And the others just complement that abundance. And for me, what I love about your work is that it transcends. Today, we're talking about not just business, and listeners are used to that on this show. I think it's one of the coolest parts of this show is we blend business and life because let's face it, the two are blended. And your work acknowledges that. Talk to us about that blending of abundance, because I tend to find, Dr. Taylor, that when life is good, business is good. When business is good, life is good. And similarly, one thing can bring the other down, or at least test and challenge the others. Talk to us about how you find that blend and why it's so pivotal to the way that you view true personality and motives.
The healthiest people in business are the healthiest people. At the end of the day, if you're really short-sighted and you're all about yourself at the expense of others, it'll come back to bite you in life and in your business career. The most successful leaders, for example, try and make others under them more successful rather than tooting their own horn. And so if you're going to be successful in business, you need to become congruent. And that means you need the gifts of all four colors to be effective. For example, when I'm as a yellow leader, it's very important for me that I show up and I'm responsible, or reds can't respect me. As a yellow leader, I have to be kind to people who are maybe slower to understand dynamics that I'm so comfortable with, instead of judging them harshly. So it's very critical that you decide, first of all, who am I at my core? And then what traits do I need to make this situation more successful? And the people that I found in business that don't do that, they actually fail. They fall short. And they're frustrated and they don't really know why. And it's because they're not congruent. They did not add the blend to their personality effectively to be successful in business.
Yeah, really well said. Congruency. I can already see how much that topic is coming up, because whether we're talking about life or business, you're right. It's congruency is the answer to all of that, which is there shouldn't be that definitive line. We should be who we are in all facets of that life. I almost want to back up here because I feel like it's so much fun, the fact that we're talking about all these colors and we've gotten right into it. But part of me wants to back up and talk to you about the actual word motive and the motivations behind this. So when I hear you as a yellow, it's a bit foreign for me because we have different motives. And so for me, I'm just like, wait, so are you here for fun? Like, how does motive play into this? How would you describe how fun plays into your view of the world and the way that you make choices?
I love that. Well, for example, as a psychologist, I laugh with my clients. Like, I'm very playful. I'm very engaging with them. I will call them out all the time, and no one gets offended because I don't have that judgmental piece. It's very much more of a curiosity and an engagement style that I have. So it works in my work very effectively. I also don't carry a lot of the baggage with me afterwards. Like, I can move on and not get stuck in the trauma that I'm dealing with. It's also interesting. When I was doing this work, I was trained in behavior, because behaviorism was the big thing when I was being trained. And I realized it was very good for certain elements, but not good for understanding the why behind the what. So I could alter behavior, but until I could really understand why somebody was behaving that way in the first place, I couldn't really be effective. And that's the beauty of the motive. It's funny, by the way, you can't try a court case and win it without understanding motive. You've got to have a motive for the crime. Where you think motive would be critical, we dismiss it all the time. We don't take ownership about what motive does. And by the way, I haven't even spoken about the real issue for me, which is clean motives and dirty motives. So clean motives are win-win. I benefit and you benefit. So if I'm being fun, but I'm fun at your expense, Brian, that's not a clean motive. That's a dirty motive. I'm using you, taking advantage of you, mocking you, doing something to make myself happy at your expense. And then blues are notorious for lose-win. They'll give up things so others can win, and they don't take care of themselves. And then there's lose-lose. That's the whites. You think I'm going down? Well, watch this. You're going down with me. So every color is vulnerable to clean and dirty motives, depending on what they do with those motives in their life.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, I feel a little exposed by you here on the air as a blue, where you're calling that out. I love that. But actually, it lays credence to, obviously, it's easy for us to talk about the pretty side of humans and the pretty side of motives and all of that. But you're right. I feel like part of our conversation here today is I'd love to open the door for you to talk about some of the blind spots that this might indicate. Because for us as business owners, as leaders, as people who are in relationships, it is important for us to be aware of that. And any insights into our strengths also in turn can give us insights into those weaknesses. So what's your breakdown there? So you're not just calling out us blues. What's your breakdown for all the other ones?
Everybody has a strong suit and everybody has a limitation. And I loved your word blind spots. For example, most great leaders will admit one of the great weaknesses they had was they didn't let someone go soon enough. They knew they weren't right, but they kept them on. And they kept them on for a dirty motive. They kept them on because they were afraid of the outcome or the fallout. They were afraid of having to replace them. They're afraid of the confrontation. But fear is always a dirty motive, whereas love is a very clean motive. So every color, for example, reds are very good at getting things done. Where their dirty motive comes in is they can be very selfish. Like, I want to get it done quickly. I don't care what damage I do. That's where they can become very tripped up by their own driving core motive. Blues, we talked about blues a little bit. They can be overly sensitive and take things personally that really are not meant for them and get stuck in that or be too needy. And yellows can be irresponsible and disorganized. Like, they say they're going to show up and they don't, and they blow it off as not a big deal. And whites really struggle to find their voice. Like, they're great leaders, except if they don't take people on and challenge them effectively with a good, solid voice, then they actually aren't respected by the others who are wanting them to take that stance. So every color has its blind spots. It's, for example, when you think about which of the colors is easiest for you. So the one that's hardest for somebody, like reds were the hardest for me at first. They're the easiest today because I developed the skills of what reds are about. And I understand them now. But at first, I didn't understand them and see the value in them. Now I can't miss it. I see it every time I'm with them. But I also see where their natural limitations will get in their way if they don't address them. So every color has that.
Yeah, I definitely dig that, especially because it puts so much into focus of it's easy for us to analyze our behaviors, which is obviously, being in the field, how much we are behavior based and we have been through the course of history. And that's why I love how you're changing the game by looking at motives. And even then, I think that, we're talking about congruency and how these things blend into one another. For me, I think it's really cool because when we take it from the motive perspective first, then we start to understand the behaviors that are manifested out of these motives. Talk to us about even before. Obviously, we're talking about a finished product now where you've developed this over years. People have been using this for quite some time now, but take us back to those building blocks because it is a new way of thinking about motive first, manifesting those behaviors. Walk us through that.
So you start with just understanding why I do what I do. You and I, Brian, may do the exact same thing, but the motive behind it can be totally different. And so if we're judging what we're doing as opposed to why we're doing it, we miss the essence, honestly, of what drives that behavior in the first place. When I first put this together, I was just so concerned that I actually get at the root of something that could be true for anybody, like an 87-year-old Black person in Seattle, Washington, and a white baby who's 2 years old in Louisiana. What is a truth I could always count on, regardless of race or age or religion or where they're raised in the world? What would be always true? The magic of the color code is, I promise you, every human being is born with their personality. It comes in the womb, it's innate. And with that comes their own unique spin on it. So no two yellows are exactly alike, but every yellow is driven by fun. And when I discovered that power, it freed me to then do my work much more effectively. When I see a client, for example, I don't start with, tell me about knowing their color and then say 6 months of therapy, the core issue of what's going on, instead of striking at the branches of issues that might be looking like they're important, but they're really not. So you have strengths and you have limitations. I first want to see if you're using the strengths of your personality to enhance your core personality. For example, if you're blue and you're intimacy based and caring, but you're very judgmental and critical of other people, then you're not going to get intimacy, which you crave, by your own negative behavior. So getting that right would be the first step I would take with someone. And then the second step is, what could you add to compensate for being judgmental and or critical? What's a trait someone has that is a positive that you could develop to do that. So let's say you decide to be kind, or you decide to be assertive, whatever it might be, that trait then becomes your focus for 6 months. And once you've developed, and I love it. I always tell my people, get a coach and a mentor. The mentor is the person that does it by nature and looks like what it looks like at the goal, at the end of the goal. And the coach is the person who struggled like you to develop that trait and can help you over the obstacles as you obtain it.
Yeah, I love that perspective, especially the example that you gave of someone who's older and maybe a different skin color than us up in Seattle versus a 2-year-old just born in Louisiana. And that example for me puts so much of life into context, because Dr. Taylor, where I go, as you said that, is I think back to, it's the quintessential nature versus nurture debate. And I'm very fortunate in that when I look back to my childhood, for example, I feel seen. I feel like my parents, for sure, my teachers, my soccer coaches, everybody embraced me for who I was. And I never went through that period, thankfully, of questioning, what is that self-identity? What is it that I feel like? What is it that motivates me? Because maybe people far wiser than me, of course, at young ages, we look up to older people to do this for us, but I always felt like they got that best side out of me. But I can't help but think about the flip side, in that I was very fortunate and I'm grateful for that. But what about for all the people who haven't figured out their color or their motives just yet? Where does that leave them? And obviously it's important for them to find that, but how do they even arrive to that point in their journey?
I was speaking at a convention in San Diego, and this 80-year-old Chinese man came up to me, and as I was walking out of the convention center, and with tears in his eyes, he said, "I will never know who I am. I was raised to be red. That's all I knew." Clearly, he wasn't red, or it would have resonated with him, but he didn't know who he was after all these years because he had been cheated. I've had many people say to me, "I never knew who I was until I was married, because finally someone cared for me and valued me enough to help me see who I was instead of being traumatizing." People that are raised in families that don't value them for their color struggle. And some people are born with a stronger sense of self than others are as well. But I have to tell you a great story. I have 4 daughters and 1 son, and the oldest daughter is red, brunette, beautiful, student body president, all those things. My 3rd daughter is yellow. She has blonde hair. She's so social, very engaging. They both had the same teacher in 6th grade. My oldest daughter got an A++ on a paper for Christopher Columbus. I was so impressed. Of course, we thought it was our parenting, right? So we kept it. When my daughter, it was a yellow daughter, the 3rd daughter, was in the same teacher's class, she was always getting C minuses, always, no matter what the paper was. So when the Christopher Columbus assignment came out, I said, "Mikkel, I want you to write your own paper on Christopher Columbus, but I want you to also copy Tara's paper and turn it in." And she turned in the same paper, and my red daughter got an A++ for and got a C minus. And I was so excited to go in and show the teacher, who was a blue, her bias towards red versus yellow. And when we confronted her with it, she was so great. She goes, "You're right. I see your oldest daughter is smarter and brighter, and your 3rd daughter is more social and engaging." So you really can, unfortunately, taint people with your own at all. And everybody's job is to nurture people in their color and then help them develop other traits that would make their life better. That's the goal. But like I don't know if I shared this with you, Brian, but when I was first putting this together, I thought I was red because my mom is so red. That was the color to be. And my wife said, "Red? You're not red." I said, "Yes, I am. I'm successful. I have a career. All these people come to see me. I'm working hard." She goes, "Taylor, where is your office?" Well, honestly, Brian, my office was on the beach. And she said, "And if a client doesn't come, what do you do?" I said, "I go to the beach. I have 45 minutes to enjoy myself." She goes, "That's not red. They don't do that." So even though I was the author of it, I was tainted to believe I was something other than what I am. And I'm actually, and when you take the profile, I am 43 out of 45 yellow. So very, very strong yellow personality with secondary being red. So I think it's important we understand that we need to value every color for who they are and help people develop their best self rather than criticizing or putting them down, or worse than that, tainting it by not valuing them because they're different than us. And by the way, we marry our opposites. So get used to it. You're going to have to learn to get along with people that are different from you no matter what you do. And in business, the best teams are a discipline of mixture. They're not when they're all the same color.
Yeah, gosh, I love both of those stories. The stories about your daughters, because it is incredible how we treat people differently through the box that they're put in. Particularly for my family, I find. So my mom's family is an immigrant family. She came to the US as a teenager. And so much of what I talk about with my uncles, especially, is they were teenagers trying to find their way in a new country. They didn't speak the language. And they're like, people like to put us in boxes. And how much of our life is about either breaking out of those boxes or saying, make sure if you're going to put me in a box, put me in the right box and treat me accordingly. So I love those stories. Yeah. I want to ask you about that because towards the end, you started talking about the makeup of teams. And it's something that for me as a business owner, as a business leader, I think about that all the time is I don't just want to surround myself with the exact same people as me because there's definitely shortcomings that I have and there's blind spots. Talk to us about some of the ways that we as leaders can and should treat and get the best out of all the different colors that are on our team.
The best leaders realize what they lack. And in knowing what they lack, they look to fulfill that with other people that are different than them. You want the same goal, but the way you go about it is different. So I found in my life, I want to fulfill me. I want to complete me. I can't do that with people who are just like me. So actually, when I'm presenting information to groups of people, I'll say to them, the person most like you here will be wonderful in supporting you because when I'm nailing you about your behavior, they will understand exactly why you're doing what you're doing. And the person least like you is the person you'll learn from the most because the way they go about a problem and solving it is so different than what you would do. It actually grows you in the process. So you should identify who you are, first of all, and then see if you're congruent and legitimate as a leader in that color. And then look for what you need to balance you, to bring out the other parts that you don't naturally have. It'll make you a much stronger team. Then you have to also be forgiving of each other's differences. Like I always tell people, minimize their limitations, play to their strengths. And for the person who's got the personality, I always say to them, value your personality, but always look on the hunt for how you can develop and progress. Like I'm 74, I'm still working at developing traits of other colors because I want to become more abundant in my life.
Yeah, Dr. Taylor, sorry, I was just looking out because as you're talking about all of these things, what I'm picturing is how this better positions you as a leader, as a husband, as a father, as all of the roles that you fulfill in life. Because so much of what you're talking about here today talks about first knowing yourself, but then really it's the word complementary, I think, that really strikes me when you share these things with us. And so part of me is thinking, and listeners know, we always ask guests, what is your zone of genius? And to me, I absolutely love your answer to this question. You said, my gift is reading people's motives and getting quickly to the core issues that need to be addressed. And when I hear that, Dr. Taylor, part of me thinks about, obviously, I don't know you in your father role, but I can imagine that knowing the different motives of your children is that when one child comes to you and maybe when they're young and they're crying and they're saying, Dad, this isn't going my way. That might not be the issue. And it's something that we as business owners face a lot is that when we're scared, when we're intimidated, when we're down, we think the issue is this thing that's facing us right in front of our way. But if we don't tie that to our inner motives, I might not realize, well, it's not that I'm unhappy with, the way this is going, but maybe I'm not supposed to be doing it solo. And maybe I'm driving myself crazy by doing it that way because I understand my motives. Talk to us about that root cause, because I'm sure that this work manifests in being better able to identify the root causes and give us some real life examples. Because gosh, I know that you have some.
I do. Well, let's go back. First of all, I'll use my example of my red daughter. So it's really kind of a fun thing you can do with your family. You rank people in terms of influence. And I always ranked in our influence myself, then my wife, then my red daughter as third, and then the other kids. When my kids, and then my red daughter. And so when I would leave the home, I would come back to chaos, but it was because I thought my wife was in charge and they all saw that my red daughter was in charge. So learning that dynamic about what was driving her, because she's power-based, wants to get things done, wants her way, it made it very easy for me to realign how that was going to work when I was gone. I'm also seeing a client right now. It's interesting. A couple I'm seeing, he's white and she's red. And they've had married for like 20 years. And here's the problem. He's dishonest. As a white, he doesn't want conflict. He doesn't want to share the truth. And it's hid things from her all their marriage. And she is done with that. She wants to have a transparent, connected marriage. And every time they start getting into therapy with their other couples therapist, they'll talk about other issues that are not even tied to the dishonesty, like the sexual connection or the responsibilities for parenting or the financial issues. And that's like hacking at the branches. The real problem is he is dishonest. And if that can't be addressed, she can't go back to him. So helping her stand her ground and be much more clear about the motive behind why she's separating is very critical for their possibility of being successful. If you just hack at the branches, you could talk for the next 8 months and not solve your problem, which is the real root issue was him being afraid to be honest with her in the relationship. So in everything you're doing with somebody, I'm always talking about what is the driving core issue of our problem that's happening. Most people, by the way, Brian, don't see it because they have blind spots to themselves. So like here's my premise that I work with as baseball, like first base, get yourself, like got to get yourself to get on base. And then second base is get truth. Where I think we're struggling in mental health and business today is there are absolute truths we are trying to make relative. We're not making them absolute. We're just assigning truths that we value as opposed to what truly is real. And then third base is get over yourself. And that's where I spend a lot of my time in businesses, is helping people get over themselves and stop making it all about themselves. And then home base is get others. So the beauty of this is if you get stuck on any of those bases, you never score. And if you don't score, you don't win. So the reality is, looking at your life right now, you can say, well, where am I really most stuck? Do I really get myself accurately? Do I get truth? Do I get others? Can I get over myself? Those are the things I kind of lead people through those steps in trying to identify where they're stuck with their negative motive and where they're working well, where it's actually happening for them. And it's not that difficult to do, to be honest with you. What I find is that clean motives and dirty motives are very critical in the process of getting people, understanding what makes them tick or not tick, and then calling them out, helping them get better.
Yeah, so much of that I want to dive into. I know that we're coming towards the end of this episode, but I don't want to let you go just yet, Dr. Taylor, because I want some of your perspectives on this, especially because you're talking about some deep and deeply meaningful work that I think you do an incredible job of. It's a complex. What's more complex than humans? I would argue nothing is more complex than humans. Yeah, but
and nothing more beautiful either.
Also true. And with that in mind, you're also simplifying it so that we can make sense of the complex. And I love that nature of your work. And along those lines, one thing that pops up so much is how much you talk about the truths. And obviously we use that mathematical proof, which is 2 + 2. It always equals 4. There's no other outcome there. Talk to me about why that is something that really deeply resonates with you and where you see that parallel with your work. Because from my perspective, so I'm 34 right now. Actually, this episode is coming out around my birthday, so I may or may not be 35. Thank you. And so with that in mind, the older that I get, the more I realize the wisest people in life have let go of so many of the things that they thought were true, and they've kind of accepted, I don't know the truth about these things. I only know the truth about so few things. So talk to me about your perspective on truth, particularly because it is such a key part of what you talk about.
Well, let's just take mental health for a minute. This is where my passion lies. I have such a commitment to good mental health, and our world is generating poor mental health today. For example, let's talk about anxiety and depression. Anxiety is fear of the future. Depression is regret from the past. And people are so caught up in thinking that they are anxious and it's okay. It's not okay. You need to address that. You need to find the confidence within yourself to know that you need to move forward and create the life you were meant to live. Instead of saying, I'm a victim of it, I can't really be blamed for it, I'm not taking responsibility for it. The biggest problem I have in mental health today, Brian, is we move away from the issue rather than facing it. We find substitutes for it. For example, when you talk about ADHD, well, every yellow has ADHD. Whether they like it or not, they have it. But when I was raised, they disciplined us in a way that we actually had to learn to manage our behavior. And now we medicate. Rather than doing the work to discipline people, to learn how to manage it, we simply medicate that. And I'm just suggesting that a truth about that, for example, is the easy path is not the easy path. Another truth I believe is that the greatest burden in life is to have no burden. The greatest burden is not to really carry other people's lives and care about them. It's only to take care of yourself. Another truth I think is that loving others versus fearing life is a much healthier way to live life. Key principles of truth that I weave into my work with businesses and with individuals that they're kind of surprised sometimes. That's simple, but I stand my ground on those. And ironically, like you said, other things in life, like whether it's diet, I don't know those truths. I'm not aware of those things. I believe they make sense when I'm told them, but I don't know them like I know mental health. I actually can feel when mental health truth is being disparaged. And sadly, the outcome of that is there will be a consequence that when you think what's true is not true, it'll come back to bite you in the end. So being with someone who really does live this truth and understand it is very critical for everyone's good mental health. And in business that doesn't have good mental health, they will succumb. They will not win in the long run. There are people that were good will leave because they don't want to be in a place that is chaotic and undisciplined and not thoughtful about each other. So I think there's very, very important truths in mental health, even today, even more so today than ever, that we ought to be looking at.
Yeah, amen to all of that. Gosh, does that fit in with the ethos of this entire show? Listeners know that for 7 years now, we've been coming to the airwaves with an equal emphasis on mindset and motivation in addition to strategy, because I don't think one can exist without the other. And gosh, if I had to pick just one, forget the strategy. If you've got a good head on your shoulders and you've got good motivations and a mindset, you'll figure it out along the way. So I love so much about that. Dr. Taylor, we've talked about so many topics today. I'm still a whirlwind. I'm frantically taking notes over here as we're talking. And I'm thinking about clean motives, dirty motives, understanding ourselves, identifying those blind spots, importantly, thinking about the people around us as well that complement us, that we're in relationships with, that are on our team. So much for us to think about at the end of today's episode. But I always love making it actionable. And I give my guests the hard part of these episodes by saying, what's the action that you think every listener should do from here? Especially because you obviously have the quiz. I think that is an essential step for everyone. But what's the thing that you think every single person should do from here, having heard this conversation?
Well, first of all, I would hope they would go on taylorhartman.com, take the profile. I'm going to give you a code, WANT30, so they get 30% off. That's how much I want them to take this so badly, to know who they are. Second thing is, I want them to sit down and love themselves. Like every single being I've decided comes with enough gifts that if they did nothing other than just be themselves in life, that's how incredible I think people are at their core. So start by loving who you are, valuing yourself as a red, blue, white, or yellow. Value yourself if you're like a mixture of the two, where a secondary color is really strong and impacts your core color. Value who you are as an individual and build that confidence that you deserve to be here on the planet. That's where I would start with the process. And then I would probably suggest they look at charactering themselves. And charactering themselves says, what's a flaw that gets in my way of my life and prevents me from living like I like to? And then circle that and then find the antidote. And the antidote that you need to overcome a limitation is never in your core color. It'll always be in some other color that you need to develop to overcome your limitation. So whatever color the flaw is in, the antidote comes in another color that's positive. And then forget the negative, only focus on that positive word that you're going to do. Write on a mirror, put it in your wallet, put it on your phone, look at it every single day, and just focus on doing things that will help you achieve that one word in your life. And then after that, you add another one and another one, and you keep going.
Yes, I love that that's where you took that question. Listeners, just so you know, that discount code that Dr. Taylor just dropped on us, WANT30, it's down below in the show notes. You don't have to rack your brain trying to remember that and stop listening. It's down below in the show notes. So it's WANT30, but you'll find that down below. And on that note, Dr. Taylor, I love so much of this that you shared with us today. I want to give you the stage because I know listeners are going to want to take the color code profile. They're going to want to start this journey that you just laid out for us. And yeah, drop all those links on us. Tell them where they should go. We'll include all these links and notes down below.
I don't have a lot to share. Just you can always reach me at Taylor@TaylorHartman.com. The book, you can get it on Amazon. I recommend the 30-year edition because that includes the color code and the character code. I also have on Instagram, we have Hartman Personality that you can go to and read about new clips and things that are happening. But it's been a pleasure being with you, Brian. And I hope your listeners can appreciate the greatness of the show.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Taylor. That means the world to me. Listeners, you know the drill. Check down below wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode. The show notes, we're including those links, as well as a link to Dr. Taylor Hartman's book, as well as, of course, to his website, TaylorHartman.com. Doesn't get any simpler than that to start figuring out what your color code is and start going down this path of self-discovery, of self-development, all of the good stuff that comes from doing this work. So Dr. Taylor Hartman, thank you so much for joining us here today on the show, being so generous with your wisdom, your experiences, your perspectives, your stories. I've loved it all along the way. So thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Brian. Great.